Hi fans, please like our video and subscribe to the RotoWire channel. Then please go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Welcome to another edition of the RotoWire NBA podcast. We are recording late Tuesday night on December 15th. Nick Whalen, joined as always by Alex Barutha. Alex, we're fitting this one in before my NFBKC draft on Tuesday night. So very much looking forward to that. You and I were initially going to be splitting a main event team, but then our esteemed colleague Ken Kreitz was banned from playing in the NFBKC this year. Reasons unknown. Initial reports are that it's because he is in a state, Vermont, that does not allow it. But we'll see. To me, it seems like there might be something else going on behind the scenes.
You really never know with Ken. He's a wild card. Maybe we'll discuss it on the Friday pod a little bit more.
We'll see if this is enough to prompt Ken to move out of Vermont finally. But anyway, we now have our own teams. That'll be a lot of fun. I know there's still a few spots available. I think we got an email today that there's only like 6 total spots available in the main event for the NFBKC. So if you haven't signed up for that, make sure you do so. Like I said, I'll be drafting tonight. You'll be drafting soon. So will Shannon. That one's always super, super fun. Never really having to worry about people just not checking their teams or not doing the waiver wire. Like it's a grind, but I think it's the most fun league that we play in overall.
I agree. Yeah, I'll be drafting next Monday, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
So I want to pick up kind of where we left off last Tuesday, and that was looking at some of the newer futures and props on the DraftKings Sportsbook. They've added quite a few more. I don't remember if a lot of these were even up last year, but in terms of player futures, you can now bet on. This is actually a new one as of today. I didn't even see this last week. Average points per game for certain players. So not only can you bet on like who's going to be the scoring champ, who's going to lead the league in blocks, assists, rebounds, steals, things like that. There are now individual props for points per game. So we'll get to those in a little bit, but I do want to start with some of the team futures. And these essentially pertain to, whether or not the team will reach the playoffs. And you and I and James will have an article coming on this sometime this week, kind of a roundtable piece, just highlighting some of our favorite bets. But James asked me a good question on this last night. He was like, so, does making the playoffs, yes or no? That's basically what all these bets are. Does that mean you make the play-in or actually make the field of 16? It's not explicitly stated on DraftKings, but I think the assumption is that if you're betting yes, Team X is making the playoffs, I think that means they're making the field of 16, right?
Yes, that would be my assumption.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple that stood out to me. I like Orlando not to make the playoffs at minus 186. I mean, you're not going to find anything here that's like incredible value. If you're getting plus anything, I think that's great. And there's a couple we'll get to there. But I mean, they're plus 150 to make it, minus 186 not to make it. I think they're going to be in the mix for the 7, 8, 9, 10. But as of right now, I think enough teams like Washington and, a team like Brooklyn, obviously that was ahead of them last year, but got quite a bit better. I think there's just enough Atlanta teams that improve below them that probably knocks Orlando at least out of maybe being the favorite for the 8 seed where they've kind of been able to reside these last few years.
Right. Orlando 33-40 last season. That was with Jonathan Isaac available a lot of the year. Terrence Ross is starting off the year hurt. Isaac won't be available the whole year. They're going to need a lot of Cole Anthony, which could lead to more losing. They're worse this year than they were last year. And like you mentioned, a lot of teams around them got better. Charlotte got better. Charlotte's looked a lot of fun in the preseason. They could be better than Orlando. That wouldn't shock me. Obviously, we talked about Washington, Atlanta. You hit on those. But Orlando's roster on paper is just not good. Like I know they keep getting it done. They have a good defense, right? Aaron Gordon, Vucevic especially is a floor raiser. Maybe Markelle Fultz gets better, but I have zero confidence. I would have zero confidence picking them as a yes. Let's put it that way, because I'd be worried about almost every other team below them.
Right, and I don't even know that Orlando got dramatically worse. I think losing Isaac is huge. You get Chuma Okeke, the 2019 first round pick back. Maybe that's something, but they certainly didn't get better. And that's the bottom line. Is almost every other team, we'll see. Like maybe Charlotte's going to be just as bad, but they at least tried to get better. They signed Gordon Hayward. They're bringing in a top 3 pick. Orlando really didn't do any of that. And even if Cole Anthony, who you, me, and James all really like as a potential rookie of the year, he's not going to be a guy that is carrying you to wins. If anything, that bet is, well, they don't have anybody else to score off the bench, and he might just kind of luck his way into 14 points a game. Not anything that's really going to change ultimately the course of your season. In a similar vein, I like Memphis, not to make the playoffs at minus 225. So you're not getting as much value here. But I think that kind of says a lot about how the Grizzlies' reputation is trending. I mean, a team that was solidly in the playoffs until the bitter end in the bubble when Portland ultimately ended up kicking them out. But, I mean, not only are you starting the year without Jaren Jackson, this is another team that outside of the internal improvement of guys like Jackson, Clark, and especially John Morant, who to his credit has looked awesome so far in the preseason, they did not get better at all. And, much like the East, almost every other team kind of in their tier in the West at least made some improvements. And some teams like Phoenix got probably dramatically better.
Yeah, people are on this one for sure.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe this could be a good value bet coming into the season. You
were on this back in like mid-February.
That's true. I was like, yeah, they were going to make the playoffs, and I'm like, listen, this team is awful. No, I still think minus 225 is good value on them to not make the playoffs, because it would legitimately shock me. Like you said, look at the teams around them, look at who they're starting the year without. Brandon Clark's even beat up. Who knows what they'll get out of Justice Winslow. I think it's going to be a pretty rough season for the Grizzlies.
And I think Morant is going to look really good. I don't know, for as good as he is, I don't know that he's the type of point guard who can just carry you to 45 wins this early in his career. Like early career Chris Paul was that good right away. And it's not like those Hornets teams were finishing first or second in the West, but right away he was like, this is the guy who raises every single player around him. And I think Morant does that, but not quite to that level. Like I think his numbers individually are going to be ridiculous this season, but I don't know that he quite affects the game at that level that it's gonna prop up like the Dylan Brookses and the Kyle Andersons of the world.
Chris Paul was a great two-way player also,
Right.
and Morant on defense is very much a work in progress. And when a team is when the team is not great around you, you need to be a good two-way player. And it's just not going to be the case for him right now.
So I'm finding I like the values on teams not to make the playoffs more than to make the playoffs. So I have another one. Atlanta, I wouldn't feel confident about this one, but you can get plus money for the Hawks, the Atlanta Hawks, who have historically not been a very good franchise, to not make the playoffs. So plus 110, not extreme value, but I don't think it's a lock by any means. They've looked pretty messy these first two preseason games. That's not really the full story, but I don't know. I think they've certainly made improvements on paper. I think the roster looks awesome, but you have some fit questions to figure out. You have some long-term viability questions as far as John Collins playing alongside Clint Capella, playing alongside Danilo Gallinari. You already have a few early season injuries. And then I think the one thing for them is it's kind of like a extremely watered down version of like what the Clippers went through last year, where you had this young core that has kind of made incremental progress over the last 2 years. And granted, it's not like they've been scrapping with the Warriors in the first round of the playoffs, but you basically bring in an entire new team, and now you're pushing Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter, guys like that kind of into the background. And I think there could be an issue with them maybe almost having like too many cooks in the kitchen at some points this season.
That is a concern. This is one that I don't think I would touch. I think for them, they really are. I think they could easily go either way. And for me, I'm an optimist on the Hawks. I would actually rather take them to make the playoffs, because I think this team has a lot of talent, which I think we agree on that. And I think most of us agree that they have a lot of talent available to them. The question is it going to fit together? Mm-hmm. Is everyone going to be happy with their role? But again, if someone gets hurt on this team, if Bogdan misses 20 games, well, they still have Kevin Huerter and Cam Reddish to fill that role. If Danilo Gallinari gets hurt, that's more run for DeAndre Hunter. I think I not a number that I would necessarily bet, because it's there's a lot of potential either way.
So the Phoenix Suns are also at plus 110 to not make the playoffs. I don't think I like this one either. Which of those two would you say you're more confident that they will make the playoffs?
Wow, that is a tough call.
Yeah.
Man, maybe Atlanta. I don't know.
It's like I think Phoenix is the better team, but they're also going up against tougher competition.
Yeah, 100%. And I still have concerns about Chris Paul getting hurt and where that may put that team. Phoenix is 100% the better team. If there was a playoff series between Phoenix and Atlanta, Phoenix would be favored, no question. But the East is a lot easier for sure.
So the Wizards are another team. They're not quite at the same level, but they're plus 100 to not make the playoffs. To me, Wizards versus Hawks is close. I like the Hawks roster a lot better, but I think I like the top of the Wizards roster a lot better. I've never been like the biggest Russ guy, but I feel like it's gone too far in the negative with Russ. Sure. Like he's still really good. He's still a one-man offense. And even though when the Thunder lost KD, they fell from the ranks of being a title contender, but they were still a solid playoff team and a team that was very much, frisky and in the mix. Like I think we've gone a little too far on the Westbrook criticism. He's certainly not a player who's going to be the number one option on a great team anymore. And maybe he was never that guy, but I think he's just a lot more consistent and a lot more of a reliable piece next to Beal than John Wall would have been.
Yeah, it's already been announced Westbrook's going to sit back-to-backs, or at least one game on a back-to-back. I think the Wizards have 7 in the first half of the season. So he's assuming there's a similar amount in the second half of the season. He's basically a lock to miss 10 games. I don't think that matters a ton. I don't know, man. This is another. I think I just don't want to bet the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Like I just want no part of Atlanta, Chicago, Charlotte, Washington. This team is just very shallow, I think. As much as I like Troy Brown, Denny Avdia is interesting. It's pretty thin after the starting 5, and I don't know how much I even trust Rui Hachimura. Although I think he's looked good from what I saw from him in the preseason so far.
Another one I like. This is my final one, and then I'll give you the floor if you have any you want to throw out. Portland, yes, to make the playoffs, minus 200. So yet again, not getting any extreme value here, but of the teams that I would consider like borderline locks to make the playoffs, minus 200 is like the best money you're going to get on any of those type of teams. And I think Portland is certainly better than last year, and obviously made the playoffs last year. They needed the play-in to get there, but even with teams like Phoenix and maybe even New Orleans, providing a little more resistance, I still think Portland to me is one that I would be pretty comfortable penciling in. Maybe it's the 6 or the 7 spot, but I think they get in. So to me, at minus 200, that's still pretty good value.
I agree. This is a team last season that made the playoffs despite their minutes leaders 3 through 5 being Hassan Whiteside, Carmelo Anthony, and Anthony Simons. This year, that should be Nurkic in there. It should be Covington in there, and they retained Melo. They got better. They definitely got better. And Nurkic for them is going to be practically a free agent signing, right? Because he didn't play almost all of last season. So yeah, I think minus 200 for them is good. I wouldn't be surprised if they were the 3rd seed in the West. So being able to get the potential 3rd seed in the West at minus 200 to make the playoffs, yeah, count me in on that.
I want to take a quick detour and talk about the Giannis extension. Obviously, that was the biggest news in the NBA on Tuesday. Kind of straightforward as far as there's not a whole lot to analyze here. It's the Supermax. We know that even though he's locked in through, I think, as long as 25, 26, if he were to opt into that final year, there's always a chance when you're a player as good as Giannis, if you want out, you can get out. That's kind of what I was trying to stress to a lot of my friends this year. It's like, well, if something happens and the Bucks are just putting a terrible team around him in 3 years, he's not going to stick it out. But anyway, this is still a huge step in the right direction for the Bucks. Does it make you feel any differently about their short-term chances this year? Like I feel like I would be more comfortable betting the Bucks to win the East, maybe not the finals, but win the East, finish with the number 1 seed, things like that, just because this cloud is now lifted at least temporarily.
Yeah, I think that's right. I thought he would sign it the whole time. I think we might have been in the same camp where it's like you get the money and then you figure it out later if you like your situation, even if your situation is just tolerable, right? A lot of times the players are going to do that. Yeah, I think Milwaukee should still be the favorite to come out of the East. They'll be a threat 100% to win the finals because I think they got better in the offseason. There are a lot of people who don't think that. but I think replacing Eric Bledsoe with Drew Holiday is a massive upgrade. And I mean, they haven't looked great in the preseason. I've watched both their games. It's looked awful. But I'm pretty confident that it'll turn around.
I almost think that's a good sign. You know, like, remember, I think like when Peyton Manning was at his peak, like I feel like the Colts went 0-4 in the preseason every single year. Like, you don't want to look good in the preseason, especially for a team that's been so good in the regular season. It's like, it's good to mix it up. Like, I hope they don't just run through the regular season, because it's setting up then for a third straight flame out in the playoffs. But no, Giannis, the 1 of 7 from the free throw line last night was extremely concerning. Holiday has not looked great. But I am with you. I think this team, overall, the roster, I don't know if it's like a whole lot better because of some of the depth that they lost, but it's at least comparable. And I think the ceiling with Holiday compared to Bledsoe is definitely higher. I mean, the Bucks are still plus 550 to win the title. That's tied with the Clippers for the second best odds. It's slightly ahead of the Nets. So, I mean, the odds makers still like Milwaukee quite a bit. The bottom line is, if you have Giannis, it guarantees you such a high floor. You know, at worst, you're basically making the second round. And I think last year was essentially their worst case scenario. So you're basically being penciled into like the final 8 every year, no matter what. And I mean, I think I said this last week, teams have won the finals with worse rosters, right? Or at least made the finals with worse rosters.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have an MVP / defensive player of the year on your team, and you have 2 all-stars / fringe all-stars as the second and third best players on the team with Middleton and Holiday. So that's just as good as, that can't be the worst, obviously.
No, I mean, I think LeBron's 07 Cavs team was dramatically worse. And obviously the league is different now. I think the teams you're going up against, you know, it's not like there's 2 or 3 teams in every conference now that have 2 or 3 all-stars every year, or at least guys who are all-star caliber. That wasn't necessarily the case in the 2000s and certainly in the 90s, but I think you need more now to get there. But I think the Bucks have plenty. You know, it's not I almost think like for a while the Heat and then the Cavs and the Warriors set an unrealistic standard for a lot of these superstars as far as what constitutes a great roster. And, you know, I would give this Bucks roster like a pretty solid B+. And, you know, when the number 1 player on that team is arguably the number 1 player in the league, that should be enough.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks got off to a slow start, because there have been a lot of moving pieces on this roster. Like, watching them is a completely like different experience. You know, they obviously got Drew, Bryn Forbes, DJ Augustine, Bobby Portis, Torrey Craig coming off the bench. It's practically a complete like rebuild around Giannis, aside from, you know, aside from the absolute core pieces. So I'm going to go off to a different road a little bit, but still talk about the title here, because on the DraftKings Sportsbook, I see the Celtics at plus 1,300 and the Heat at plus 1,500. And I think it's insane. And I'm not using that word lightly. I think it's insane to have the Boston Celtics as shorter odds than the Heat to win the NBA Finals. Yeah,
that is wild. I don't know if this is a post losing out on Giannis dip for the Heat, where they're factoring in some like organizational depression.
Right.
That is strange. Yeah. I mean, I think those numbers should definitely be flipped. And I don't even know if it should be that close. You know, I think, so you have Boston at 13-1, you have Miami at 15-1. I don't think it would be that crazy to have Miami at, you know, 12-1 and Boston at like 18 or 19-1. Like I don't know. I mean, Miami was in the finals last year. They beat Boston. I think Boston probably got a little bit worse. I think you have some pretty serious concerns about Kemba Walker's knee, which are first and foremost when you're talking about their ceiling. And, you know, Miami didn't get a whole lot better, but they're bringing back the entire team from last year. And then you're swapping out basically Jay Crowder for Avery Bradley, which is probably a lateral move.
Yeah. And I mean, the 76ers are 20-1. You know, they're plus 2,000, and they have the same level of top end talent as the Celtics, right? I know the 76ers were disappointing last year, but if we're talking players 1 and players 2, and maybe even if you go 3 deep, if you want to count Tobias Harris against Kemba Walker, especially with Walker's knee issues, I don't think they should be separated by that much.
I think the Sixers might have a better roster than the Celtics. I think the Celtics just have more continuity. I guess like they're the safer play because we haven't seen them bottom out like we have with the Sixers last year. But I'm pretty high on Philly. I mean, I was definitely too high on them last year, but I think so many things went wrong for the Sixers last year, and that almost certainly can't happen again. And I wouldn't say like a ton went right for the Celtics. It felt like they probably had the season that they should have had. But I mean, unless you're really factoring in a major leap for Jason Tatum, which I don't even know what that would mean at this point. I mean, he basically averaged over the second half of last year was like almost a 30-point per game score. Like I don't know that his ceiling is that much higher. The bench is cleaned out. You have all your depth is basically at center. You have no real guard or wing depth. Like there's some concerns there, especially if Tatum or Brown were to miss 10 games at any point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Celtics kind of bottomed out this year. I've been really low on them leading up to the season. So I thought that was just a really interesting note. Also that the Warriors have better odds than the Blazers. So
yeah, I mean that's not shocking, I guess, just because of the Warriors being the Warriors. But no, it should not be a difference of 30-1 versus 50-1. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the division odds at all? There's a few that stand out to me. I really like Dallas to win the Southwest at -225. I still think Dallas is probably either a piece away or a couple years away in terms of development from Luka and guys like Porzingis from really competing for the title. But when you look at the other teams in this division, you can pretty much cross off the Spurs and the Grizzlies. I'm pretty low on the Pelicans. They're 5-1. I don't think they're a division winning team this year. And then Houston's also at 5-1. If somehow James Harden has a miraculous twist of faith and wants to stay in Houston, obviously they're a threat, but that seems extremely unlikely at this point.
Yeah, I think this is a solid bet. I mean, the Dallas was better than Houston last year. Dallas was plus 4.8 point differential. Houston plus 2.7. I think there needs to be concern about how much Porzingis will play, because he might just end up playing like 35 games, maybe 40 games, and that would be a concern. But even if you put the Kristaps Porzingis available for half their games against an unhappy James Harden or no James Harden and like John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, I don't know. I think this is a fine number, -225. And I think this would be the best odds that you would probably get it at, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, this is probably your best chance to get Houston as well.
Right.
Because, if Harden leaves, it's gonna completely tank. Now, depending on what they get for Harden, who knows? But that's an interesting one for sure.
How do you feel about the Atlantic, which I think is quietly now the most competitive division in the league by a huge margin? You have Brooklyn, Boston, Toronto, Philly, and then the Knicks, who are down at 250-1. I mean, all four of those teams, you have Brooklyn at plus 125, Boston plus 250, Toronto 320, Philly 400. I like betting Toronto or Philly. I still think the Nets are the best team in that division. I'm very high on KD this year, but I mean, Toronto has basically become the new San Antonio. They're going to be good no matter what. And we just talked about how much we like Philly. I think there's some value there.
I think there's value on everyone but the Celtics and the Knicks. I think the Nets at plus 125 is good value. They have KD and Kyrie Irving. If those guys stay moderately healthy, even if they each miss 20 games, the Nets team that we saw last year with Spencer Dinwiddie, LeVert, Jared Allen, those guys was a pretty solid team. They're basically like a even net rating. So if they can at least keep their heads above water, if Kyrie and KD miss time, they'll easily have a chance to do this to win the division. And then 76ers. Raptors, again, both really competent, and those are solid numbers.
All right, I want to look at scoring title odds now. I think it's absolutely insane that James Harden is a massive favorite. Like I think he should still be the favorite. He is still on the Rockets, and when he's with the Rockets in recent history, studies suggest that he will win the scoring title. With all the uncertainty around Harden, I don't know how he can still be this huge of a favorite. Like, I would not bet on James Harden to win the scoring title. I think there's too big of a chance that something happens and he's like away from the team for 3 months and misses too many games that he's ineligible, or he's traded to Philly and can't play the same style that he's played the last few years. The same would go if he goes to Brooklyn. I think it would be even harder for him to score 30 a game in Brooklyn than it would be in Philly or certainly in Houston. There's always a chance that they ship him like to Sacramento or something like that where he doesn't want to be and he can just launch 40 shots a game. But I mean, am I crazy? Should he be this big of a favorite? I think it's leaving the door open for a ton of value for some of these other contenders.
I feel the same way. I think having him such a long, like
I never know how to phrase this either.
Yeah, but regardless, it does open up value for everyone else on the board, especially Doncic at plus 650.
That's insane.
Again, my concerns with Porzingis, I think, are warranted. And if you take Porzingis out of the equation, the second best scorer on the Mavericks is Tim Hardaway Jr. Third best is probably Josh Richardson. Maybe Trey Burke if you're feeling like, I don't know. But that puts Doncic in a position where he's going to have to launch a ton of shots every single game. I mean, he's going to be he already has been the hub of the offense, but to an even greater extent from a scoring perspective. So I think having him at plus 650 is great. I'd prefer him over Lillard, who's at the same odds because Lillard has way more help than Doncic. Curry, plus 800. That's also a fair number. Giannis, not sure I would bet it because of the minutes situation that he's been in the last year or so. But yeah, Doncic is definitely my favorite number at plus 650 there.
Yeah, same here. I think for a guy that we're talking about as the MVP favorite, like you said, it almost benefits him in some ways that he doesn't have a great roster around him and that he's beginning the season without Porzingis. Like he's not an inherently selfish player, but he's going to have to play selfishly for them to win games early on. Like, would it shock you at all if like 3 weeks into the season he's just on this crazy tear, averaging like 37 a game? Like, I mean, we've seen guys like Lillard kind of go on those runs before when they've had to. I think he could do that. I don't like Curry quite so much at 8-1. This just doesn't have the feel of like a revenge tour season for him. Like, I think he'll be good. I don't think he's going to lead the league in scoring good. Lillard at 650 makes sense. There's some value in Giannis if you see this as, maybe they play him, God forbid, 33 minutes per game instead of 30. I mean, all of a sudden you start prorating his numbers and he's over 30 points per game. Like he basically averaged 30 points a game in 30 minutes last year. So I think there's some value. And the nice thing is you don't even have to feel that good about it because you're getting 11-1 on Giannis, leading the league in scoring. And honestly, chances are one of the, top 6 or 8 guys on this list ends up getting hurt or getting coronavirus and missing enough time that it knocks him out of the race. I think I would consider Trae Young at 11-1 as well. Maybe KD at 25-1. Like that to me seems like more KD coming back to prove a point as opposed to Steph doing that. And then in terms of long shots, I think Tatum at 50-1. That's, incredible odds. I think Tatum could very easily be at 20-1, and that wouldn't seem that crazy. And then I wouldn't bet this, but Zion at 100-1. He looked really good. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He looked great in their preseason game on Monday night, had 26 points in that one, an easy 26. Like the ease with which he's able to score around the basket is crazy. Again, I don't think he's going to win the scoring title, but he basically sleptwalked his way to like 25 points a game as an out of shape rookie last year.
Yeah. I think if you're looking for pure long shots, Tatum at 50-1, Embiid at 100-1.
Yeah.
I think those are the two that I would look at.
Julius Randle at 150.
The fact that he's 150 when Embiid is 100 is just complete disrespect to Joel Embiid.
Well, or it's respect for Julius Randle's game. Like this shows that Vegas is watching these games. Like Julius Randle has better odds than Ja Morant.
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's got to be just an East Coast market thing,
Possibly. I think it's just a Julius Randle shoots the ball every time he gets it thing.
Well, that too.
Yeah. No, there is some value down the board here. The scoring title, if you look at the leaders, it's basically always the guys that you think it would be. There's not a lot of like shocking scoring title winners over the years, so I wouldn't recommend betting anyone outside of the top 6 or 7. But again, getting guys like Giannis and Trae Young at 11-1 is still really good value. I don't have quite as many takes about the other stats that you can bet. Just going down the line, Hassan Whiteside is the favorite to lead the league in blocks. And again, there's no criteria here as far as if they're counting total blocks or blocks per game. I think it's blocks per game, though, because there is a caveat about having to qualify for the league leaderboard. So that makes it even crazier. Hassan Whiteside is very possibly not even going to open the season as a starter. I think this is kind of reminiscent of the Harden thing where, with Whiteside, like, yeah, there's a lot of interest maybe in him after last season. But, anyone who's paying attention knows that he's almost certainly not going to replicate last season unless you're betting that Rashawn Holmes gets hurt.
Right. Yeah, this is always a tough one because to some extent blocks and steals are pretty variable season to season. It can also depend on how bad the perimeter defense is around you, if the guys get funneled to the rim, if guys start respecting you more and they don't even bother driving on you,
Right.
which is kind of the situation that like Gobert can find himself in. And yeah, I mean, value wise, I guess Mitchell Robinson at 800 at plus 800. But that's just, again, I think Nerlens is going to start for them. So that's kind of a similar situation as Whiteside, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, if it was one or the other, I would love either Robinson or Noel. Like they're both some of the best per minute blocks and steals guys in the league, but I think they're just going to end up kind of splitting minutes, and it's going to be gross for everybody involved.
I love the Chris Boucher love. He's actually on the board at 100 to 1. Willie Cauley-Stein. How did people come up with this?
How does Willie Cauley-Stein have the same odds as Giannis? JaVale McGee?
You know?
Yeah, I think this is just like anyone who has played center at all. All right, assists. LeBron is the favorite. Trae Young close behind. Luka Doncic close behind as well. Not a ton of value here. I think I would probably just go with LeBron again. It seems like they're going to employ a pretty similar plan. Although I think there's a chance that even if he ends up playing more games than we expect, he's maybe ceding more possessions to guys like Schroeder and even more playmaking from Anthony Davis. I don't know. I think he kind of enjoyed averaging double-digit assists. That seemed like something that he took pride in. So I think he tries to get there again. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he's passed up by Trae Young, who was pretty close behind last year. Doncic, I don't know about Doncic. I mean, you're basically be asking him to average a triple-double, which is plausible. I think if anybody could do it other than Westbrook, it would be him. Would you consider anybody but LeBron, Trae Young, or Doncic?
Westbrook is at least interesting to me. If he has the ball in his hands a lot, I don't know exactly how they're going to run their offense, but still interesting to me. Ben Simmons is kind of interesting to me at 12 to 1, but I don't feel like that's great value. I think the upside is there for Morant to average almost 10 assists a game, but again, I don't feel like any of this is amazing value. Chris Paul 33 to 1. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of value on this board.
No, me neither. I think it would be more interesting if you were betting who would lead the league in total assists, because then you could start making a case for like the Devontae Grahams of the world, who I think he missed like one game last year. And,
right.
If LeBron misses 12 games, obviously that's a pretty huge difference.
Yeah, it is. It's assists per game, though, unfortunately. So I don't know. It's tough.
Do you have anything for rebounds or steals? I don't feel too strongly about those.
No. Capella at plus 2,000 catches my eye. Embiid at plus 2,000 kind of catches my eye right away. Steals. Marcus Smart 25 to 1. Sure, fire it up. DeJounte Murray 25 to 1. Maybe,
yes,
yeah.
That's the one I have in mind too.
Yeah. Lonzo's interesting. If they did a steals plus blocks thing, Lonzo would be a little more intriguing. Other than that, I don't really see a ton unless John Wall is completely healthy.
I think Thibault too, if he is able to get 25, 30 minutes, maybe that would require an injury or something. But I think he's going to take a step forward. And I mean, he's almost like the Mitchell Robinson of steals, where you look at last year, like he was insane on a per minute basis in college, and that seemed to translate at least last season. So I think he's worth a look, at least at 50 to 1. All right, before we get to some preseason takeaways, you have noted that the lines are up for not only opening night, but Christmas Day as well. Anything stand out to you from either of those slates?
Let me see here. I guess Bucks only -3 over the Celtics. I feel like that line could be double that. I just, Kemba Walker's not going to be available. We don't know if Tristan Thompson is going to be available. I feel like you have to take the Bucks in this situation. That's the one that really stands out to me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to note too, like whether home court ends up meaning anything, because we've seen in the NFL that home court advantage or home field advantage has virtually disappeared. And if anything, teams on the road were winning more games than home teams for a while. So, I think maybe on the surface, that's part of it. Is you're usually factoring in a couple points for the home team, whereas if this was in Milwaukee, it's probably closer to 5 or 6 points. But with no fans in the stands, I don't really know what kind of effect that's going to have, especially when you're talking about the first game of the year. You'll have plenty of time to arrive early. You're not on a tight travel schedule, things like that. In terms of opening night, I think things look about right. Lakers -2.5. I think that could maybe be a little bit bigger, but again, not a true home game really for the Lakers. And then Nets -5 over the Warriors. A little bit of a disrespectful line, I think, to the Warriors, but at the same time, it's Kevin Durant, and he's looked awesome so far. I'm so ready for a KD comeback season.
Yeah, I think the Nets line is fine. I think I would probably bet Nets. I think a lot of people will bet Warriors, kind of as like a revenge thing to Kevin Durant. I don't know. I don't know who's getting revenge on who there, whether it's Durant for them playing him and tearing his Achilles. I think that line is fine.
Well, here's a question. So let's say this game is in Brooklyn, but let's say it was a normal year and Durant makes his decision, is playing for the Nets, whatever, things are normal, and this game's in Golden State. He gets a standing ovation, right?
Yeah.
Not like the most thunderous standing ovation, but an ovation nonetheless.
Yeah, maybe they just. I think you either stand up and don't clap, or you just sit and clap. I think you got to find a halfway. Maybe you have one section stand and not clap the other half. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere.
Yeah, you're not whistling. You're not doing any of this. You're not holding up there's no thank you KD signs.
There's like one maybe by like a 6-year-old or something who doesn't know what he's doing.
Right. I think it would be an applause as opposed to an ovation. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Is there anything on Christmas that stands out to you? I mean, we have Nets Celtics. Nets are only -1 over the Celtics, which again, I think that line is crazy. I think Celtics are being way overvalued early in the season.
Yeah, this is another home game for Boston. So again, we'll see if maybe those start to adjust as the season goes on, and if home court is proven to not really be that much of an advantage. But yeah, I mean, so that implies that the Celtics are like 4 points better, 4.5 points better than the Warriors.
I would not agree with that.
Yeah, kind of a weird line. I'm with you there. I think Lakers -7 over the Mavs is a little bit larger than I would think. I mean, I think those teams played really closely. It felt like every time they matched up last year, Luka versus LeBron, obviously that brings out the best in both of those guys. And I'm pretty low on the Pelicans. So Miami 5.5, I think at home on Christmas against the Pels is pretty good value.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm okay with that Heat line. I'd be more inclined to bet on the Heat. Lakers, I just don't want to bet against Luka Doncic. I guess that's the main concern about that line. He's that good.
Yeah.
I think the value on that's fine when Porzingis is out. I think the Lakers got better. The Mavericks are worse for now. So I think that line is fine. But again, I don't think I would bet it because I'm not sure I'll ever bet against Luka Doncic this year. It would scare me. Yeah,
I think the two major storylines, if I had to predict for this year, are Luka like really coming into his own and having a like 06 LeBron type of season where it becomes very clear that he's the future of the league. And I'll say it for like the fourth time. I really think KD is going to remind people how good he is. Like we haven't seen it in so long because of the Golden State thing, and I think we kind of saw it with Kawhi when he got to Toronto after missing basically the whole previous year. Like there are very few players in this entire league, probably 4 right now, who you put them on any team and that team is a threat to win the finals. And we really haven't seen KD have to be in that position since his last year in OKC. And I think he's just going to be ready for it and going to remind people that like it was a legit debate for the last decade. Would you rather have KD or LeBron? And, I feel like as soon as he went to Golden State, that kind of faded away. And I think that's going to be back in a big way. Let's look at the preseason. So very weird preseason schedule. Some teams are only playing 2 games. Some teams are playing 4 or 5. But I mean, basically half of the preseason happened over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We had a pretty big slate Monday and then a smaller slate tonight on Tuesday. Who do you want to hit on right away? Could be rookies, could be guys like Harry Giles, Taylon Horton Tucker, who've stood out. Could be second-year guys. Who's caught your eyes so far?
Man, I don't know. I've tuned into the that first Hornets Raptors game to see some LaMelo. and the passing was as advertised and maybe more so. He is an absolutely incredible passer. I think he's a better half-court playmaker than Lonzo. He cannot score at all, but he's just the Hornets are going to be a really fun team to watch. I think they're a league pass team. I'm going to say it now. I know it's not what anyone expected, but
thank you for your courage.
LaMelo Ball to Miles Bridges, alley-oops, incredible. They play well as a team. I was really shocked. I was like enjoying Hornets basketball. It's a lot of pump fakes, drives, kicks out.
Yeah, well, they look good too now with the pinstripes.
Yeah.
No, he's on my list as well for sure. I think I wrote in a preseason notes column yesterday that his debut was like almost exactly what you would expect from like a really unique, kind of weird player like him. No points, 10 rebounds. I think he had 4 assists. Half of his assists came on behind the back passes. Like you were right. Like he's more aggressive than Lonzo for sure. Like he didn't make any shots, but he's at least taken them. You know, Lonzo would have games early on where he would take 1, 2, 3 shots over, 37 minutes. You know, he was not shooting threes at all. If he'd get into the lane, he would just kind of always be looking to pass. And I think LaMelo has that same level of passing, but like with Lonzo, there's not quite as much flair to it. There's not like, we saw some of it at UCLA. That never really seemed to transfer over to the NBA. Like he's a very good passer. He's an effective passer, but he doesn't make a ton of wow plays. And I feel like LaMelo's already had more of those in 2 preseason games than Lonzo's had in like 3 years.
Yeah, the concern for him is just going to be right now he's played 36 preseason minutes. He has 7 turnovers and 6 assists. Not great. 13 rebounds. That's fantastic. But again, I think he's going to be a non-factor at scoring. He might average like 6 points a game this year.
He's going to have one of the weirdest like stat lines ever for a rookie.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be a good fantasy player, but I'm excited to watch him. That's for sure.
Anthony Edwards did not look great in his debut. Looked a little bit better, I thought, last night. Kind of tough to get a gauge for that one. I wasn't able to watch it live, but there's just something about him where he doesn't really like jump off the screen in the way that you would like a number 1 pick to jump off the screen. Like he had a breakaway dunk, hit a corner 3 kind of over a defender, but it just like didn't look all that special. And maybe I'm just being too nitpicky, but when you're looking at, a 19-year-old who you really think could be a future, all NBA caliber player, that's the type of guy you're taking number 1 overall. To me, it just didn't really look like he has that quite yet. Maybe it's those like weird horizontal Timberwolves uniforms that kind of take away from it. I don't know. But like I compared him, before we started chatting, like with Donovan Mitchell, you knew right away, like watching him in summer league, watching him in preseason, it was like, oh my God, this guy he's just next level. He just makes plays that superstars make. And look, I mean, we're like 40 minutes into Edwards' career. It's way too early, but I don't know. He just didn't really stand out to me. And I think that's a minor concern early on.
It'll be hard for him to stand out on this team. I think they have Rubio, they have Russell. Those guys they're going to handle the ball the majority of the time. Towns is going to get his 25 and 10. He's going to handle the ball a fair amount because he can average 3 or 4 assists. And I mean, Edwards doesn't. I mean, he's in a pretty low pressure situation. They would love him to be great because if he's great, then they can make the playoffs. But the first showings were not great, like you alluded to. It was 17 points on 23 shots. He was 2 of 12 from 3, and he had 8 turnovers to 3 assists, which is awful. And he's a minus 31.
Yeah.
But I think he'll improve. It's just finding a role for him is going to not. He's in a weird spot.
Yeah, and also of note with the Timberwolves, Ricky Rubio has come off the bench for each of these first 2 preseason games. And you don't want to read too much into it, but they've used the same lineup in both games. So it doesn't really look to be like an experimental thing necessarily. Fantasy-wise, that's a pretty big concern. Although at the same time, I never really loved the idea of going like Rubio, Russell, Beasley, or Rubio, Russell, Edwards. But so far they've gone Josh Okogie on the wing and gone Russell at the 1 with Beasley at the 2.
Yeah, I thought they were going to start Rubio and Russell together, and then Edwards at the 3. And I also thought they were going to start Hernan Gomez at the 4. So it's kind of been surprising overall. I know Ryan Saunders, the first game, said, don't look too much into this. We're still experimenting. And it's like, you did this on purpose. Like, no one You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
this is
classic
not an accident.
Timberwolves.
This is not an accident that these 5 guys are starting. And now that they've started a second game in a row, I'm pretty sure it's going to be their lineup. I still think Rubio is going to get 28 minutes a night, could even hit 30 minutes a night in like a Dennis Schroeder type role.
Yeah.
But I am concerned that Edwards is kind of going to get squeezed out by Russell and Malik Beasley a little bit, and that he might just see like 24 minutes a game.
Yeah, I want to hit on a couple more rookies real quick. Isaac Okoro was really, really good in his debut. 16 points in the fourth quarter, hit a couple big threes, had the game-winning basket on an and one. He looks a little further along, I think, than most people expected. We'll see if the three-point shot is real. I think that was really the thing that was holding some teams back with him is the shot didn't look great. The percentages were not good at Auburn. And there was some concern that would maybe just never come. But I think he already looks more confident than most people expected. I'm still a little tepid on him as far as what the impact will be in year one. I mean, especially on that team. It's just the Cavs are so hard to figure out. You know, you're bringing along 3 young guys plus Kevin Porter. Then you have Kevin Love, and you still have Larry Nance and guys up front. Not a great roster overall, but I do think there's going to be opportunity for him. I wouldn't draft him in a fantasy league though.
No, they got to move away from Segi Osman.
Yes.
They got to get rid of that situation and open up the minutes for Porter and Okoro. I think for me, main takeaway from Okoro, he's averaging 8.5 free throw attempts per 36 minutes through 2 games, and you don't see a lot of rookies get to the line like that. And you mentioned his confidence, and that's a big part of it, being willing to drive into the lane, create contact, try to finish. So that is a huge standout for Okoro. And if he can continue to do that, and he can keep his defensive numbers high, like people assume he will, then he's going to have a good year then. The question, I think, will just come down to minutes and shots to some extent, because this is a team that still has Sexton on it, still has Kevin Love and Andre Drummond, and Darius Garland still has to be brought along. And Garland, this is a big year for him as well. But he's looked, he hasn't looked great either, but
Yeah, the numbers on Garland weren't great. I thought he had some plays that were pretty impressive, especially in that opener, but yeah, he's a major. We'll see. Tyrus Albert, I thought, looked really good in his second game. Didn't do much in the first, but kind of had the type of line. I think it was something like 13 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal, a block. Like that's exactly kind of what you're hoping for from him. So he was great. Pokashevsky, This dude's the real deal. I think the Thunder might be a sneaky league pass team as well this year. Like I really didn't think he would even be like NBA caliber. Like I thought he would be a G League guy, and he still might be for much of the year. But I mean, he came in firing. Like he looked like he was in his 10th NBA season, like in terms of the confidence that he had. And he is crazy skinny, but I don't know, like he wasn't really getting pushed around. He handles the ball as well as any player his size, honestly. I mean, his lowlights were as low as any player in the league so far during the preseason, but it's really intriguing to watch. Like he really has like the ability to snake around pick and rolls at 7 feet. Very much remains to be seen what the long-term upside is, but I think he landed in a great spot to at least be able to experiment with him this year.
Yeah, he got about 20 minutes in that first preseason game. I agree with you. The highlights were awesome. The lowlights were awful. Although that's kind of how I felt about LaMelo Ball to some extent.
Yeah.
This happens. And I think he can maintain about 20 minutes. Honestly, I don't know what they're going to do with the rest of the rotation. Is like, who knows? I think Bazley's going to get minutes, and Dort's going to get minutes, and Diallo's going to get minutes. But other than that, who knows?
Yeah. That's the thing, is you don't have a roster full of like Sexton, Garland, Porter. Like there's nobody like that on this team. Like even the guys you named, like what is the ultimate upside? You're talking about like a pretty good, like Bazley could be like a pretty good role player. Dort could be a pretty good role player. Like these aren't guys that you're going to be funneling shots to.
No, not at all.
All right, we got a few more minutes. Let's touch on some non-rookies. Harry Giles and Taylon Horton Tucker, I think, have been the two who've stolen the most headlines. And unfortunately, both of these guys are in like just terrible situations to actually play during the regular season. And I think I was going to say it's especially true for Giles, but it's really true for both of them. I mean, if Horton Tucker had this kind of mini breakout last season, I think there's a chance that he's like the Lakers' 8th man. I think they added so much depth this year that there's just almost no chance that he'll be in the regular rotation to begin the year. I think the question with him is more, if he plays really well in the G League or plays really well when guys are sitting or injured early on, like, is there a legitimate chance that he could end up, kind of usurping like a Kyle Kuzma in the rotation eventually?
I think there is, and I don't think it's too early to say that Kuzma's job is kind of in jeopardy here. Because when you watch the Taylon Horton Tucker like highlights, or you watch a condensed game, the way that he operates, he has control of the game. He has control of every possession. He's a good passer. He knows he's good with his up fakes. He's good with his dribble moves. He's a talented player. And this is the kind of stuff you do not see from Kuzma. I know Kuzma is like a forward/wing, and he's mostly a shooter, and he's supposed to be able to kind of create his own shot. But I would just rather have a guy like Taylon Horton Tucker out there, honestly. So I know it's going to be tough for the Lakers to find minutes for him, but I think they would gladly. I guess it would not shock me if Kuzma got moved at the trade deadline because Horton Tucker was playing so well.
Well, and Horton Tucker seems to have the backing of guys like LeBron, who they were talking about him even in the bubble. And back then it seemed like, okay, are they just trying to like hype up? Right. Like he almost seemed like a mascot back then. They're like, why is this random rookie who we haven't heard of all of a sudden playing all these minutes? And I don't know. I mean, it just seems like a story where eventually somebody's going to write the feature on Horton Tucker, and there's going to be all these quotes about how he's been like just dominating practice for the last year and a half. And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think right now even his like game-to-game upside is probably higher than Kuzma's, because for this team, Kuzma's just not. He's never really been a great fit. They've made it work. He has a reputation of like being a great shooter. He's not a great shooter at all. He's not a good spot-up shooter. He's almost better kind of going one-on-one, hitting those tough mid-range shots, which are just not a great shot in the modern NBA. I mean, Horton Tucker, I read this morning, of all the players in the entire league, he is both the longest and heaviest player listed at 6'4". Like he's just a unique athlete in general. And then you watch, I mean, last night the ball handling is on a different level. The control in the half court. The guy he actually kind of weirdly reminded me of, and I'd be interested to see if you agree with this, is CJ McCollum.
Sure. Yeah, I'm down with that comparison. Yeah, the size is good. He could obviously it feels like he doesn't dominate with his athleticism, but he uses it really well. And I'm looking up, you mentioned someone writing a piece on Taylon Horton Tucker. I remember seeing Kevin O'Connor just published one a couple days ago, and there's two quotes. You kind of mentioned LeBron. LeBron said, quote, telling you right now this kid is flat out special, mark my words. LeBron doesn't just say that unless it's about Shabazz Napier.
Yeah, I was going to say, unless it's Napier.
And then Frank Vogel said it's going to make his job very difficult. So I think it's very real to expect Horton Tucker to be a legitimate part of the Lakers rotation this year. It's not going to be easy, again, for him to find minutes, but I think it's legitimate.
I would like to see him play over Wesley Matthews and maybe at times Caruso. I mean, you and I watched Wesley Matthews a ton last year. He was not good. He was not good for the Bucks.
He was fine. I think Caruso, Horton Tucker backcourt, like deep backup minutes will be really good for the Lakers. I think they'll be able to skirt by with that a lot of games. And
I think if nothing else, the word is out there now, and you can either dangle Horton Tucker as trade bait. I mean, he's never going to be like a Michael Porter type of asset, obviously, but it enables you to do that. If you have the opportunity to beef up the roster, especially with the Lakers being very much a win now team, you have that in your back pocket. And then, whatever fears you would maybe have about trading someone like Kuzma or even like a Montrezl Harrell, at the deadline, somebody like that, having this guy in your back pocket, I think enables you to just slide him in and not feel like you're losing a ton of depth.
Yeah, I think they would be more likely to trade Kuzma. When's the last time LeBron said anything even moderately that glowing about Kyle Kuzma? Which kind of reminds me, I was thinking of maybe places Kuzma could go, and I thought about the Knicks, which made me think about Kevin Knox. Do you want to guess Kevin Knox's shooting this preseason?
0 for 50.
3 for 12, 0 of 5 from 3, 5 turnovers to 1 assist.
Sounds about right. That sounds like Kevin Knox.
He's out of the league. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I mean, half this Knicks roster could be out of the league. I just read a story the other day that like Dennis Smith is squandering his last chance with the Knicks already. I mean, those guys were both like, they were the same draft, right? Were they consecutive picks?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Maybe Smith was a year ahead. Either way, they're both top 10 picks, and the Knicks roster is absolutely trash. All right, we got to wrap it up. I will provide a recap of my NFBKC draft later this week, so keep an eye out for that. I know you'll be prepping for yours as well. One more week, so we'll still have plenty of content leading up to December 22nd, but kind of that final countdown now.